Hello, good morning, and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. First up, a piece of information. If your target is Civil Services Examination 2024, then I have a news for you. Attempt the BYJU'S National Scholarship Test on the 10th of September at 11 a.m. And if you score well, you may get up to 90% scholarship on our live classroom program. And to tell you, the final batch of CSE 2024 shall commence on 4th of October. We will be starting with Indian polity, where I will teach the entire Indian polity from prelims and mains perspective in 24 lectures every morning 6 o'clock. So please register. The link to register for the scholarship test is provided in the video description. Score well and get up to 90% scholarship on the live classroom program. So let's get started and look at the topics that we will be discussing today. These are the topics that we shall be discussing in today's analysis. First up, there is an editorial, India, that is Bharat. There is also a lead article written by former IFS officer, India, Bharat, and a host of implications. And this is something that we have covered in yesterday's the Hindu Newspaper Analysis as well. There is some additional information that you need to be provided with, which I will share. But first up, a brief recap of what the issue is all about. A dinner invitation was sent by the President, Honorable President, to those who would be attending the upcoming G20 summit. This dinner invitation was also sent to the chief ministers of the states. Now, customary, this invitation would be sent from the President of India. But now the word used in the communication is, the phrase used in the communication is the President of Bharat. Honorable Prime Minister is also attending India-ASEAN Summit. There also in the communication, he's being referred to as the Prime Minister of Bharat. And there are critics who say that maybe in the upcoming special session of the Indian Parliament, the government is planning to change the name of this country from India to Bharat. And there are also others who say that this is yet another way of Hindi imposition, because Bharat is a term used in Hindi. Sanskrit as well, but predominantly in Indian context used as a Hindi word. When the Constituent Assembly was debating the Constitution, there was also a discussion, as we discussed yesterday, on the nomenclature of this country. What would we call this newly independent country? Some said, let's stick to this word India because that is how we are known the world over. Some said, no, we should call this country Bharat because India is a name given to us by the colonizers. So we should reclaim our identity, our culture by calling this country as Bharat. Some said we will call this country Hindustan. Some said Bharat Varsh. And some who were influenced by the Soviet Russia or Soviet Union, they said, why not call this country Union of Socialist States of India? But ultimately a compromise was reached. Article 1 of the Indian Constitution reads, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. So we have dual name for this country, India as well as Bharat. But be that as it may, this is something which was not acceptable to Muhammad Ali Jinnah. The name India for this newly independent country was not acceptable to the architect of Pakistan, Jinnah. Why? Because of his two-nation theory, wherein he proclaimed that Hindus and Muslims are two separate communities with different ideologies, different aspirations, and they cannot live together under one common nation. Hence, we need to come out of the Union of India. We need to come out of British India. In fact, Rahmat Ali, way back in 1933, coined the term Pakistan. And it was primarily an acronym. P stands for Punjab, A, the Northwest Frontier Province, also known as Afghanian, K for Kashmir, S for Sindh, and TAN, Tan, which referred to the Balochistan. So Rahmat Ali coined this term for this newly independent country or soon to be independent country way back in 1933 known as Pakistan. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah wanted that India should adopt the name either Hindustan or Bharat. Why Hindustan? So that we can convey to the world that the country was partitioned along the religious lines, Pakistan for Muslims, Hindustan for Hindus. Or you should call this country Bharat. That was one reason. Reason number two, reason given was, if it was British India was part of United Nations as well, a multilateral organization. If British India was part of United Nations, but now this British India is to be divided into India and Pakistan, or two different countries, who will be the successor state? If India or this newly independent country would retain the name India, then we can assume that the successor state is this India, and they will automatically be getting admission in the United Nations. They don't have to re-establish their international identity. So Jinnah wanted, long story short, that these two dominions which have been emerged after the partition of this country, one would be called Pakistan, the other should be called either Hindustan or Bharat. Why? Because if this other country is known as India, then they would be automatically admitted to United Nations because they will be part of United Nations as a successor state. They don't have to establish their new international identity. While on the other hand, Pakistan would have to establish its independent identity. It has to now get admission into United Nations, apply for the membership, which it did later on. But ultimately, the side from ours was clear that the successor state is India, and India is the name of this country. Not just this. When the constitution was adopted, the Hindi translation of the constitution was also adopted. But then a need was felt. And this need became the basis of 58th Constitutional Amendment Act 1987. What was the need? The need was, since we had the Hindi translation of our constitution, we also need the authoritative text of our constitution in Hindi language. What does that mean? That means not just the constitution as it was adopted on 26 November 1949 or as it was enacted on 26 January 1950, but further amendments made to the Indian constitution should also be translated into the Hindi language so that we can use this Hindi text of the constitution for legal purposes. That was the need, and this need was realized because of the 58th amendment. So now even the Hindi text of the Indian constitution is an authoritative text. Mr. Vivek Karju writes that when we look at the English translation or the English version of the constitution, Article 1 says India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states, which means primacy is given to the word India in the English version of the constitution. But when we look at the Hindi constitution, it primarily states Bharat ka Samvidhan in Hindi language, and Article 1 reads Bharat arthat India Rajyon ka Sangh hoga, which means here the primacy is given to the Hindi word Bharat. The Gazette of India is also known as Bharat ka Rajpatra. That means Hindi word Bharat, English word India, they have been used together for decades altogether. And both respect the sentiments of the people. In fact, Subhash Chandra Bose, Netaji, he preferred a more inclusive term known as Hind. That is why he gave the slogan Jai Hind. And that is what Mr. Vivek Karju writes, that the President of India, when she ended the Independence Day speech this year, she ended it by saying Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, which means if the name of this country is India as well as Bharat, but internationally we are known as India. If internationally we want to drop the name India, we need to communicate it to all the organs of the United Nations, to all other countries as well. But that may require a constitutional amendment under Article 368 to drop the name India. But even if this Constitutional Amendment Act is passed, who knows? The Supreme Court will say this is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Because in 1973, a 13-judge bench of the Supreme Court in Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala said that there is something known as basic structure, which no amendment to the Indian Constitution can violate. Parliament has the power to amend any provision of the Constitution, save the basic structure. And there are some items which are part of the basic structure. For example, supremacy of the Constitution, parliamentary democracy, free and fair elections, rule of law, independence of judiciary. All these are part of the basic structure. Who knows, the Supreme Court would also say that apart from these items, the very name itself, India, is also part of the basic structure which no amendment to the Indian Constitution can violate. And Mr. Vivek Kaju writes, in any event, the tradition of using India in English and Bharat in Hindi is wise and constitutionally correct. Should its change be a priority now? That is what you need to know from this editorial and this lead column written by Mr. Vivek Kaju. Let's look at another important column, Bridging the Malnutrition Gap, the Bemetara Way. This article highlights the importance of nutrition counseling. What is this nutrition counseling? What and how to eat, when to eat. Now here, we need to understand this district in Chhattisgarh known as Bemetara and Bastar. Bemetara, which is a district which was recently created in 2012, it was a new district created. Bemetara district is agriculturally rich. It is situated along the fertile plains of Chhattisgarh. The inhabitants are affluent as well. And not just that, this district is unaffected by Naxalism. On the other hand, you would know that Bastar, a tribal dominated area, the worst affected district by Naxalism. But why are we comparing Bastar with Bemetara? Here, as of December 2022, according to this author, who is also the IAS officer serving in Chhattisgarh, as of December 2022, there were 3,299 children who were categorized as severely malnutritioned children, severely affected by the malnutrition. And this figure is can be compared with the figures that we see in Bastar. Long story short, this article highlights the significance of nutrition counseling, which basically means when to eat, how and what to eat. Counseling sessions should be carried out. Contrasting Bemetara with Bastar. Bastar worst affected by Naxalism. Bemetara, located in the fertile plains of Chhattisgarh, is affluent, agriculturally rich as well, is least affected or unaffected by Naxalism. But when we look at severely affected children by malnutrition, the number can be compared to that of the Bastar. Then what the Chhattisgarh government did, it announced a program known as Pot Laika Abhiyan, which according to Chhattisgarh website and some other news portals, they refer to this program also as Hamar Sughar Laika Abhiyan, which basically translates to Healthy Child Mission. Under this program, what do? This program is carried out in 72 of the most affected Anganwadi centers, those areas which are affected by the severe malnutrition children or also moderately malnutrition children. The term here used is medium acute malnutrition children, although you can use the term moderately acute malnutrition children. Ultimately, in these 72 districts, 72 Anganwadi centers, where 72 Anganwadi centers where this program has been launched, Healthy Child Mission. Every Friday, what happens? Parents belonging to the severe acute malnutrition children, moderately acute malnutrition children, they are called for counseling. They are basically myths related to nutrition are dispelled, some superstitions are dispelled. They take the help of Panchayati Raj institutions, sarpanches, Panchayat Sachivs. They take the help from religious leaders as well to dispel some of the myths surrounding food, to dispel superstition surrounding the food. And ultimately in 9 months, they were able to reduce the malnutrition children. Close to 53.77% of these children, they came out of malnutrition, which speaks volumes about the role that is played by nutrition counseling. And the IAS officer Suruchi Singh says that we should replicate this model throughout the country, because providing midday meals is good. Providing hot cooked meals is also good. In some states, eggs and nutritious diet is also provided. That's all okay. Nutrition security is a must. But apart from that, what we also need is nutrition counseling. Basically convey and communicate to the parents when to eat, what and how to eat. You should be able to wash your hands repeatedly. That is how we can realize the dream of having a healthy India. That is what you need to know from this article. Let's look at another article, how unemployment is measured. Unemployment is not the same as joblessness. International Labour Organization, ILO, it says who is an unemployed individual? Somebody who is out of work, somebody who is available to take work, and somebody who is actively searching for work. Such an individual is unemployed. Some of you may have been working previously, but now since you want to attempt Civil Services 2024, some of you may have quit your job. Which means, are you out of work? Yes. But you are not actively searching for work, which means you are not unemployed. That means unemployment is not the same as joblessness. But when we look at labor force includes all those who are employed plus all those who are unemployed. Clear? Basics. All those who are employed plus all those who are unemployed, they are part of the labor force, which means students who are neither employed nor unemployed, they are not part of the labor force. Similarly, those who are engaged in unpaid domestic work. Unfortunately, the kind of work that our women do in our households, they're not paid for this. And ultimately, that is not captured in the GDP as well. What is GDP? The measure of all the goods and services produced in an economy. But the kind of work that is being done at the household level is unpaid and as such is not part of the GDP. Which means students, as well as those who are engaged in unpaid domestic work, they are not included as part of the labor force. And what is this unemployment rate? It is basically the ratio of unemployed to the labor force. That is how we calculate unemployment throughout the world. But calculating unemployment, particularly for a country like India, which is a developing economy, poses further challenges. And which are these challenges? Challenge number one, I was unemployed last week, but this week I am a casual laborer. For example, there is harvesting season in Punjab and Haryana. I go and work in the agricultural fields as a contract laborer, which means I am employed right now. And the remaining part of the year, I'm engaged as a farmer. How would you include me? as employed or unemployed. That's a challenge. There's a further challenge because searching for job, searching for work is conditioned by social norms in India. How social norms in India? For example, women. Multiple surveys have been carried out. Women, they're traveling from their home to the place of work. They take the public transport. And unfortunately, using this public transport, they are groped as well. And when they convey this to their parents or to their husbands, that they have been groped in a moving bus, in a public transport while they were commuting to the work, what do they tell them? That you should quit your job. I don't want you to work where you will be groped in the public transport. So lack of quality, safe public transport is forcing women to come out of the job market, to come out of the labor force. But not just that. National Sample Survey Organization carried out a survey. According to that survey, close to 33.3% of women in rural India, close to 27.2% of women in urban India. Who are these women? They are working in their households, but they are not paid for their work. They are working as part of unpaid domestic work. These 33%, 27.2% in urban area, when they were surveyed, when they were interviewed, they said we are willing to work. That means right now they are out of work. They are available to take work. But if they will get this work within the household itself, can we include them as part of the labor force? Because they are out of work, but they are available to take work. But if this work is available within the household, so if we can make the work available within the household, they would be then actively searching for work. How would we include them as part of unemployed or employed? Unemployment rate. If an economy is unable to produce more jobs, unemployment rate would increase. That's not a rocket science to understand. But the point is, in India, unemployment rate is high, primarily because post 1991 reforms which were implemented in India, it led to a growth which was known as services-led growth. That means a bulk of our GDP is contributed by the services sector. But services sector, they do not produce enough jobs. Enough jobs would be produced by the manufacturing sector. And for that, if we need unemployment to be tackled, for that the jobs in the manufacturing sector should go up. Not just that, there are some who also talk about post-work society. What is a post-work society? For example, there are some who say using artificial intelligence, using machine learning, a bulk of entry-level jobs would be automated, which means not enough jobs would be available to the people, but people will not be actively searching for job. Why? Because this post-work society would be supplemented with universal basic income. And what is this universal basic income? Regardless of the amount of work that you're doing, every single month you will be paid a minimum amount of money, regardless of what you are doing. So when individuals will be paid universal basic income and majority of the entry-level jobs would be automated with the use of technology, then people or some people would not be actively looking for job. So in a post-work society, where some of the people may not be working, but they would still be receiving money from the state in the form of universal basic income, unemployment rate would be reduced. Why? Because people are not actively searching for jobs. But now in India, it is further compounded by another problem. And what is that problem? National Sample Survey Organization. This National Sample Survey Organization, it looks at the current employment status of individuals by looking at two broad categories. Which are these two broad categories? Number one is CWS, which is current weekly status. And the second one is UPSS, which is usual principal and subsidiary status. What does that mean? National Sample Survey Organization conducts a survey, conducts interviews, asking the people, are you in job? Are you searching for job? Actively looking for job? And basis that, we calculate the unemployment rate. Under this current weekly status, what happens? If the survey is conducted today and NSSO is surveying, interviewing the people, we will ask individuals, have you ever had a job or have you worked at least for 1 hour on at least one day in the preceding 7 days? So we are conducting the survey today. We are asking individuals, in the past 7 days, on at least one day, for at least 1 hour, were you engaged? If yes, then you are employed. Current weekly status. But what about usual principal and subsidiary status? I will make it slightly simple. If, for example, for more time you were engaged in economic activity, for example, as a worker, in the preceding year, then you are employed. What does that mean? For example, I am an individual. For 5 months, I was not a worker. But for 7 months, I was a worker in an industry, in a factory. Which means for more time in the last year, I was engaged as a worker, which means I am employed. Not just this. If you are not a worker for the majority of the time in the preceding year, but for at least 30 days, not as a worker, but at least for 30 days in the preceding year, you are working in any subsidiary economic activity. Any subsidiary economic activity. You can be a casual laborer for 30 days or more. You can be employed as a contract worker in any factory for 30 days or more. You are employed. In India, we see this usual principal and subsidiary status, unemployment rate according to this is lesser. Because there is always a probability that you will find a job in the preceding 1 year, at least for the entire 1 year, or some part of the last year. But this is further compounded by a problem. For example, COVID-19 lockdown hit the country. The country was under a lockdown from, I think, 27th of March 2020. And we lost a lot of jobs during that period. Now, here is an individual who for 5 months could not find a job because you were thrown out of the job because of the COVID-19 lockdown, because of the pandemic. But now in the 6th month, you have got the job, which means for majority of the time you were engaged in the preceding year, you are counted as employed. Which means under UPSS, you will be counted as employed. But if we will ask in that quarter, in April to June quarter, were you engaged for at least 1 hour, for at least one day in the preceding 7 days, you would say, no, I was not employed. And that is reflected in this graph. In April-June 2020 quarter, the unemployment rate under the CWS, current weekly status, spiked to 20.8%, which means it was during that time when the country was under a lockdown and people were unable to find a job, any economic activity for at least 1 hour in the preceding 7 days for at least a day. What is the whole crux of this article? It says that unemployment may finally become an election issue, where elections may be fought on who can generate employment in India. What is your policy? What is your program to lift this country out of unemployment? But for a developing country like India, to successfully tackle unemployment, it is important to understand how it is defined and also how it is measured in a developing economy. And that should become an election issue. And this is the real issue on which the elections should be fought. That is what you need to know from this column, how unemployment is measured in India. Let's look at another important news article from the prelims perspective. SPG chief Mr. Arun Kumar Sinha unfortunately dies. The SPG Act was passed by the Parliament of India, and this is an act which provides for, listen to me carefully, the constitution and regulation of what? Of an armed force. Who would do what? Who would protect? Whom? The Prime Minister. Where? In India as well as abroad. So the Special Protection Group Act of 1988 is an act of the Parliament which provides for the constitution of an armed force, the regulation of an armed force, and this armed force would be responsible for protecting the Prime Minister when the Prime Minister is in India, when the Prime Minister is abroad as well. And we call such protection proximate protection, immediate protection, very close protection to the Prime Minister. And initially only the Prime Minister and his family members, close family members, were protected by the SPG. Then came the assassination, the unfortunate assassination of Shri Rajiv Gandhi, former Prime Minister of India. At the time of the assassination, he was the leader of the opposition in Lok Sabha, but was not protected by the SPG, was not given proximate protection by the SPG, because SPG protects only the Prime Minister and the immediate family members. He was an ex-Prime Minister, and that is how an amendment was made, and then former Prime Ministers also and their family members would get protection by the SPG for 10 years. Even after 10 years, there will be threat evaluation. And basis on the threat evaluation, this SPG protection can be extended as well. That's how Shrimati Sonia Gandhi, her children, since they are part of the immediate family of an ex-Prime Minister, threat perception was evaluated. They further got the protection by the SPG, extension of the protection by the SPG for more than 2 decades. Then came 2019, and this SPG Act was amended by the Parliament. According to this Act now, only the Prime Minister and his relatives who are residing with him at his official residence would get the protection. So according to the amendment made to this Act in 2019, only the Prime Minister and those of his close relatives who are staying and residing with the Prime Minister at his official residence, they will get protection by the SPG. Also ex-Prime Ministers, but only for 5 years. That means an ex-Prime Minister and his immediate family will also get protection, but only for 5 years till they demit the office, after they demit the office. Which means today, only the Prime Minister of India gets protection under the SPG. Because Prime Minister has remained in office for close to more than 9 years. The last Prime Minister we had was Dr. Manmohan Singh, who demitted the office in 2014. So he could have got SPG protection only till 2019. And once the Prime Minister or an ex-Prime Minister is deprived of the SPG protection, his immediate family members would also lose the SPG protection. One small line on Mr. A.K. Sinha, an IPS officer, former IPS officer who was also part of the police establishment in Kerala. He was the one who established the first police website in India. He was also instrumental in setting up cyber police in Kerala and played a very important role in BSF as well. but unfortunately has passed away. Now let's look at two important questions for your mains practice. Number one, counseling people on eating and feeding practices along with monitoring their progress can prove to be a game changer in our fight against malnutrition. Comment. Question number two, in order to successfully tackle unemployment, it is important to understand how it is defined and measured in a developing economy like India. Comment. That is it from our newspaper discussion for today. If you liked the session, do not forget to press the like button, drop in your comments, and see you next time. Till then, have a great time. Bye-bye.